Hello, and welcome to Trade Talks, a regular series on key issues surrounding global trade and transportation. I'm Tom O'Brien of the Center for International Trade and Transportation at California State University, Long Beach, and my guest today is Terry Bills, who's the Global Transportation Industry Manager for Esri. Esri is a technology company based in Redlands, California, and a provider of geographic information software, web geographic information systems, and geodatabase management applications. And Terry is responsible for their transportation programs worldwide. And we're going to have a discussion today about the relationship between technology, transportation, and trade. And we'll also talk a little bit about the future of technology and what it means for how we engage with the world around us. Terry, welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here.
I want to start by talking a little bit about what you do and what the company does, because it really is a story of American leadership in technology.
Okay. So Esri, and the full name is the Environmental Systems Research Institute, was actually founded in 1969 by Jack Dangermond, and he had just finished a master's at the Harvard School of Design and Landscape Architecture. And there were a small group of students that were really focused on how could they use newly emerging computer technology to really look at environmental and land use issues. And so he came back to Redlands, which is where he was from, and started this company in 1969. And some of the early attempts, looking back on them now, are probably a little humorous. They were actually leased computer time from the University of California at Riverside on the mainframe, and trying to create maps using X's. And so some of those early maps were, let's say, should be in the history. But from that, actually in 1983 was the first version, the real version of the software. And from that point on, then it's really been grown to be the world's largest geographic information systems technology worldwide.
And what is GIS for our layman viewers out there who may not be aware?
Yeah, so again, it's Geographic Information Systems is the acronym. And really what it does in the simplest terms, it allows you to marry maps together with information or with databases in a more technical way. And what it really allows you to do is to overlay different sources of information in ways that you really begin to build complexity, and you have the ability really to uncover new patterns and really see new insights. And rather than looking through a bunch of computer printouts and tables and so forth, when you really can see it on a map, as they say, a picture tells a much richer story, and the same thing with GIS. It really allows us to understand and really discover new insights out of our information.
I think it really is a different way of thinking digitally, and probably the best way is to sort of demonstrate that by showing some of what it's possible and capable of doing with our viewers. Is it almost like a different language?
In some ways it is, and you know, people do talk about spatial thinking being a little bit different than. Certainly, I think that it gives you another way of thinking about your information, a way of visualizing the information. And once you understand really what GIS can do, then it really opens up a vast new research avenues, new ways of really dealing with and analyzing data. Most people think of geography as that course that they took in high school where they had to memorize all the capitals of, well, but it really is geography underneath. It's the ability to marry the location of different events in ways that helps us better understand our world, really. And I think that that's certainly our tagline as a company. Is really the science of where, and that's what we take that very, very seriously as a company.
But GIS is so much more than just an academic exercise, right? It finds an outlet across many different industries. Where might you see it, or where working?
Yeah, so we actually work across roughly 50 different industries. So everything from banking and real estate, education, health, and the utilities, obviously transportation, but really there's pretty much not an industry where we don't operate. And I think that in some ways most of us feel that we're really just discovering and really sort of scratching the surface in terms of what geographic analysis, location intelligence will really deliver to a wide range of industries across the board.
It's about the visibility of the information and making it meaningful to the people?
It's about the visualization, but it's also the ability really to, the software actually integrates with any number of business systems, business intelligence tools, really very high-end sort of statistical packages. And so really it gives you the way of really sort of analyzing the information, interrogating the information. And increasingly we're moving into, quote, what they really call big data, and it really is a big data world. And so GIS gives you the capability really of interrogating those very, very large data sets and helping to understand them and really to discover and see insights out of that very, very large information.
Right, and the data is only as useful as your ability to take meaning out of it. Your area of interest and background is in transportation and planning, and I think that's one of the areas where GIS has had its biggest impact and maybe its highest visibility. Talk a little bit, if you can, about the ways in which GIS as a tool helps us understand our systems and networks.
Right. Yeah, so certainly planning and land use, given the origin of the company, was one of the first areas where it was really applied, and also in terms of environmental analysis. And what it really does allow you to do and is to, let's say when we're looking at transportation, and I used to be a transportation planner, so we want to understand the interactions of changes that we make to land use. So if we adopt a new general plan and with higher densities, what will be the impact on the transportation networks, on the infrastructure, and similarly on the environment. And I guess I would have to say that in terms of our founder, that was really the original vision, was that how do we bring together all of those different elements in a way, in a holistic way, so that ultimately we can better design more sustainable and environmentally sustainable and livable communities. And that really is kind of the focus, much of the focus of the company still is really on that.
So for somebody who's not a techie, right, they're most likely to see the impact of GIS in the way the city in which they live might communicate a future development pattern, or where a street might be put in.
So yeah, for the average person, unfortunately, a lot of GIS is really sort of in the background, but. So every utility that you use, electric, gas and water and sewer, all of those utilities are actually using GIS in the background to actually manage the distribution of their utilities and to understand when they have an outage and how to quickly respond. The property that you own is actually managed by the county assessor using GIS technology. So they actually have
we actually have a picture of somebody using GIS in the field, right?
So and obviously all the streets and most cities actually have larger cities have a traffic management center. They're actually using GIS to manage that traffic in real time. So a lot of what the ways that GIS is used, the average person may not necessarily see, but it really is fundamental in terms of the way that we operate and manage many of our critical systems in our urban environments and others as well.
How long has it taken us to get to a point where it penetrates all of those areas of our of municipal operations or city life?
Yeah, so again, I think many of us really feel that we're just starting that process, that GIS is now really becoming much more ubiquitous and much more adopted, and that's been if you went back 20 years ago, it was pretty difficult to really implement, and it took a lot of effort, and much like many other technologies in the early days, it really took heroic efforts, and there were failures along the way. Today it's much easier to implement, and not only for the people that are really sort of doing the programming and setting up the applications, but increasingly what we are seeing is that senior executives are now, so that in many agencies, they're actually logging on every day. They have an executive dashboard that really gives them their performance for yesterday, last week, last month. I personally work with a number of state departments of transportation, and these dashboards and ways that they can really monitor their performance, not only for their own internal, how do we continuously improve our performance, but also how do we communicate that performance out to the public. And I think that's critically important.
Yeah, I think that is an important point, because very often I think that community residents, or even some executives might think that the technology or a technology is not accessible to them. They always wonder about the validity of the data. So the accessibility of an improved GIS system over time really, I suppose, helps business, but also helps people become more comfortable with the data that comes out of it.
It does, and I do remember this was a number of years ago. I had a meeting with a long since retired planning director at the city of LA, and I said, well, why aren't you using more GIS? And he kind of rolled his eyes, and oh, it's too difficult, and just to get a map I have to, and those days are fortunately long gone, and quite frankly, it's very easy to use, and particularly I think more and more agencies. So we ourselves have 350,000 agencies around the world that really depend on the technology really for their day-to-day operations. And
so I mean, a lot of us may have no idea about the impact of GIS, but it could be in a report that we get from a company that we work with on on an annual basis or a quarterly basis uses data that GIS developed.
Yes, indeed.
And how is GIS changing other things that we do? How is it changing the way that we approach or analyze issues, our environment around us?
Right. So I think what has really happened, and it's not just GIS, but other technologies, I think that agencies and both public and private have really begun to understand the importance of their information and of their data, and they're really beginning to see that as really an asset, if you will. And certainly among some of the state departments of transportation, they're specifically calling out their data and information as assets. And so it's the ability to look at how do I integrate my business systems, my information systems, GIS, in ways that I can really give the latest technology to every one of my workers. And we sometimes refer to that as a digital transformation. We're actually assisting a number of the state departments of transportation. It is in some ways going from paper processes. So the field workers used to go out with yellow sheets of paper to do their inspections and so forth. Well, now they actually take out a tablet, and literally they take the information with them, they validate the information, they update the information, and that's seamlessly communicated back into the corporate databases. So it's really this process of moving from paper to how do we utilize all of the latest technologies in very efficient ways, ultimately to make better decisions, and how do we really be more productive, and how do we do our jobs faster, better, and cheaper in a certain sense. We're all under pressures to do more with less, and so I think smart agencies really look to technology in ways that how do they effectively and successfully leverage technology in ways that really will allow them to do a better job.
Yeah, you mentioned problem solving, and
Right.
that's an important skill that I know at the university we try to develop, and that's something I think GIS has helped with. And we've got a graphic to sort of demonstrate what the output might look like in a way that helps people understands and break apart problems.
Right.
There's been some sort of talk about sort of the democratization effect of technologies, and you've I think made a good case for how GIS can impact a major agency like a state DOT. But what about people on the ground? Is the fact that we all carry smartphones give us access to the type of information you're talking about?
It does. I think most people are already, whether they are aware of it or not, they are familiar with GIS. Many of us use map to get here. I certainly navigated here with my smartphone. And
Hands-free though, right?
Yeah, hands-free. That's correct. So. But what I think a number of, and particularly I think a number of us have the hope that what it will allow is a way of creating a communication. And so, for example, we worked with the city of Los Angeles and the mayor had a program, it's called the Geo Hub, and many cities put a lot of data up on their websites, and it's called open data and so forth. And they realized that wasn't really enough, just putting up a bunch of data. People really don't know how to access it. They don't know what the data means. They don't have good ways of understanding the data. So he worked with our president, and we really designed the Los Angeles Geo Hub, and it's really designed a set of initiatives that were important to the mayor. So Vision Zero, which is really focused on how do we drive down traffic fatalities and traffic crashes in the city. And so you can actually go to that website and you can actually see where all where the dangerous intersections are. Where are the pedestrian, sort of serious injuries and fatalities? Where are the bicycle? And in a certain sense, it creates so if I'm a bicycle rider and I see that, I want to communicate to the city that, are you really doing something about that?
And you've just given our audience a bit of homework during the break. And we are going to take a short, brief break at this time. We have an interesting and fascinating discussion underway with Terry Bills about geographic information systems. And when we come back, we're going to shift our focus, Terry, a little bit to how this technology serves the purposes of global trade. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Okay.
Should your company buy or sell, expand or not, relocate, or simply stay the same? If you'd like to examine past and present predictions, integrating finances and people, and make future predictions based on all that information, a career in economics is for you. You can become a part of this exciting field with a degree from Cal State Long Beach.
Welcome back to Trade Talks. I'm Tom O'Brien, and our guest today is Terry Bills, Global Transportation Industry Manager for Esri. Terry, before the break, we sort of talked about the big picture with regard to GIS, its evolution as a technology, its penetration into our daily lives, the ability for us to use it as we navigate our way throughout cities. I want to turn our attention a little bit to trade and transportation. This is of course, Trade Talks. So I want to talk a little bit about the ability of GIS to help us understand the way goods are moved and to connect some of the players in what is a really distributed and global network.
Sure. So we really have, with modern trade, we do have global supply chains and really international transportation networks. And as an example, we work with a large retailer, and we'll just leave it at that. They actually have 15,000 suppliers worldwide. So for each one of those suppliers, they need to really monitor very carefully some background information. Are they paying prevailing wage? Are they following good environmental practice? But they also need to be able to understand and see those shipments from all those 15,000 suppliers, they actually don't bring those shipments back to warehouses for redistribution. They actually manage the shipments directly to the end retailers. And so that visibility is critically important. And really the key challenge for many international and global companies is really managing those global supply chains, because we really have become a greatly interconnected world, and we have these different modes, everything from ocean-going vessels that here in Southern California we're very aware of that. Something like roughly 40% of all containerized traffic comes through the two ports of LA and Long Beach.
Conservatively.
Yeah. So, we have, national freight railways that are really the envy of the world. We have trucking. We have really a very rich intermodal system that I'm not sure that people always understand kind of the critical importance of those networks really to our economy. And
yeah, I was going to say it's when you need to sort of visualize this trade at a global level, it can get very complex and overwhelming. And I think GIS, if I understand it correctly, helps us understand that better. You actually brought a slide to share with us that actually demonstrates how you can visualize global trade from at a very high level.
Correct. So I can actually, with GIS, the slide that you're referring to, we're really looking at ocean-going vessels. Every vessel is required by the International Maritime Organization to send up a radio packet every 5 minutes saying, this is who I am and this is my position. Well, we have the ability to track every one of those vessels worldwide. So I actually have a slide that I sometimes show that I can show you the location of every vessel over 20 meters everywhere in the world at a one-time snapshot. And it really illustrates the rapidly changing trade patterns. The trade used to be north-north. Well, increasingly we're seeing north-south and south-north and south-south, and the ability to see all of that trade. Conversely, I can see I can display the location of every plane anywhere in the world, and that is actually you really have to use techniques to simplify it. Otherwise, you're simply just seeing what looks like a big mess. And so, but it's the ability to analyze that and really use that. So, for example, with either the Port of LA or the Port of Long Beach, I actually have access to databases that can show every shipment out and every shipment in, and where they came from around the world and where they came from within the U.S. And that's really important information, so that for really looking at trade flows and really how do we look at where, from an economic development point of view, where do we have blockages and where do we really need to make more substantial investments to create a more seamless sort of multimodal networks, if you will.
I imagine too it's also useful in times of recession to show how the goods aren't flowing. I recall a very popular image of ships hanging out in the harbor outside of Singapore, which was tremendously illustrative and impactful if you wanted to see what happens when goods are not moving globally.
So as a sort of rather unique example, with the fluctuation in world oil prices, what a lot of people don't realize is that storage for a lot of oil is actually on oil tankers, and we've actually been able to monitor fluctuations in oil prices that you'll actually see a very large group of vessels trying to come in so that they can unload on that particular day to take advantage of. And so literally you can see these peculiarities in international trade, and particularly with the price of oil and its impact on local shipping. So
it's fascinating. But it's interesting because you talk about the sort of the impact within individual sectors. How does how does GIS as a tool help us connect all of a really disparate group of people with very, very different self-interests?
Right, it is. So let me start with sort of a smaller example. If you take the port, for example, what you really have, most people from the outside just see the port. Well, in fact, you have a large number of actors. You have the port, you have the terminal operators, you have the shippers, you have the drayage firms, you have the pipelines, you have the rail companies, and those are not entities that are used to sharing a lot of information, and they actually all operate fairly independently. So what GIS, and in a few cases, what GIS will allow them to do is really to share the minimal set of information that they need in a way that how can we be more efficient, more effective. So as an example, the Port of Rotterdam is a self-contained, it's surrounded by the city of Rotterdam. The Port of Rotterdam is the largest port in Europe. It wants to double their throughput, but they can't expand. So how are they going to double their throughput? Well, the only way that they're going to do it is by being more efficient and really optimizing all of their processes. So they've worked with us and our technology to really bring those different players together in ways that they said, all right, we understand that the shippers don't want their information communicated to other shippers and same thing, but we're going to share the core set of information that we need to really optimize the throughput, and that's really what they are doing. And they're really want to be the smartest port in the world, and how do they really do that with technology. And so where I think we feel a little that the missing piece, we work with the ports, we work with the airports, we work with the rail, the freight rail, we work with the major players individually. Mm-hmm. The missing opportunity in a certain sense is how do we put that together, and how do we really look at, again, where do we have the inefficiencies? How could we do a better job? How could we improve our transportation effectiveness that would actually give us better economic competitiveness? And so one of the state departments of transportation that we worked with, Iowa, if you're in Iowa, you're entirely dependent on your exports, which are predominantly agricultural. And so the former executive director of Iowa DOT would spend a great deal of time pulling together the information that how could he drive down the transportation costs in the state of Iowa to the point to where it became so economically competitive that it really was a draw for manufacturing. And he brought in supply chain experts to help advise him so that how could the DOT make the proper intermodal investments that would really help drive down the transportation costs in Iowa. Well, we need to have that same kind of thinking across the country, because clearly our economy, and I think we understand that maybe even more so in California, but our economic competitiveness really is a function of those transportation networks and the efficiency and the effectiveness of those transportation networks. And as a country, I'm not sure that we've put those pieces together in a way that that would really allow us to begin to have that discussion and really look at where we need to make substantial investments to improve our economic competitiveness.
Yeah, and you're not the first person to sort of talk about the challenges of getting together the stakeholders. But you raise an interesting point about the economic development potential and the power of useful information. One of the things I know that the global trade and its domestic trade as well grapples with is the environmental impacts of its operations. And one of the stories they have to tell is how they're attempting to balance environmental mitigation with productivity. Is GIS useful in that, in solving those problems?
It is actually. In Europe, it's actually a European Union requirement that the major shippers really have to look at the economic impacts of the various modes. And so we actually do work with a research group out of the University of Delaware that's really, we've been helping, and they're really trying to put together these international transportation networks to really look at the trade-offs between time, cost, and environmental consequence. And is it possible to really look at how do we optimize the least environmental damage in the movement of our goods and services? Similarly, we work with, there's a project that we've supported at the University of California at Riverside, really looking at environmental routing for trucking firms. And so how do we take into account elevation changes, congestion at various times of the day in ways that we can really minimize those issues. I think that, you know, certainly in this area, both of the ports have understood that there was certainly a certain amount of opposition on environmental grounds, and I think that both have really tried to address that in a fairly significant way. And clearly, there's more that we can do, but I think that I think, you know, sort of perhaps optimistically, but I think we can solve a lot of these environmental challenges. I think that what we need to understand is how we can make those infrastructure investments that are more environmentally sustainable. And
when you're trying to adopt a global solution, right, or even a statewide solution, the ability of all of the players to take part equally is a challenge. Not everybody has access to the same technology. Not everybody has access to the same skill sets. How do you balance that and try to identify solutions so that the technology doesn't become the impediment?
Right. So there's sort of two answers. One is that, you know, there are certain questions that, so for example, at the ports, everyone worldwide recognizes that they would like to have what are called single windows. That is a single window for customs and all of that. And yet that's probably been the most difficult thing to implement. I talk to the companies that do that, and it's not because the technology is really the simplest part of that. It's how do you get all these disparate entities to work together, and it's those bureaucratic issues. And so I say that, you know, in a lot of cases, GIS isn't going to solve that. That's you know, that really takes, you know, sort of politics and, you know, bureaucratic you know, sort of intelligence and creativity in a certain sense. But I do think that, you know, it is possible when you have multiple players, and the technology has become, again, so much easier to use. So I really do, you know, I do see any number of executive directors now using GIS with some regularity, so that I think that the GIS can be designed and configured in such a way that anybody can use it. And I think that helps equalize the playing field, or level the playing field in a certain sense, as long as everyone has access to the same information and can analyze it in the same ways. I think it does create a more level playing field in some ways. And you're not going to solve the bureaucratic issues, but you can at least solve the right information is there if people elect to use it intelligently.
Right, as you stated, the technology is rarely the key problem.
Correct.
It's willingness to share the information to what may be perceived to be a competitor,
Correct.
particularly along the supply chain.
Yeah.
I think you've made a great case for the technology as a solution to a lot of the challenges, but are there, in many ways, the trade and transportation industry is one of the few that still depends upon a handshake in some cases. So are there instances where the technology just isn't the best solution from your perspective?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would say that it's the technology is not the best. I guess I will say that some of the industries that I deal with are probably some of the latter ones to the technology party, if you will. And so I think it's the ability to discover and the ability to adopt the technology. I think the technology can really help any number of agencies really squeeze out the inefficiencies. But it's the recognition, it's getting over the fear factor. And so certainly in certain industries, trucking, for example, is a classic one where they've really been the larger firms have been early to adopt technology. The smaller firms, the margins are just very, very low, and so there's been a lot more reluctance to adopt the technology there. I do feel that, as I've said a couple of times, I think we're really just scratching the surface, and I think that if I was to advise anyone that really wanted to go into supply chain management and really kind of the science behind it, operations research, the ability to apply those, the technologies and the science behind that in ways that can really squeeze out the inefficiencies are just tremendous. So.
You make a good pitch for the student of supply chain understanding politics
correct.
As well.
That's right, exactly.
Well, this continues to be a fascinating discussion. We're going to take one more brief break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the future of GIS as a technology and its relationship to things like artificial intelligence and gaming and virtual reality. We'll be right back.
International business, huh? Number 1, know the culture of that country. Come alive with Pepsi. Translated into Chinese is, Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the dead. PepsiCo made that mistake in Taiwan. Learn about strategic planning, government policy, and policy analysis, and so much more. You can become a part of this exciting career field with a degree from Cal State Long Beach.
Welcome back to Trade Talks. I'm Tom O'Brien with the Center for International Trade and Transportation at California State University Long Beach, and I'm here with Terry Bills, the Global Transportation Industry Director at Esri, and we have been talking about GIS. And Terry, now it's time to turn our attention to the future, right? The fun stuff. We're not going to hold you to any predictions you make, but we are interested in your expertise. How do you envision the future of GIS as a technology? Where do you see it going?
So beyond the fact that it's going to become ever more ubiquitous and used, and we as a company really only focus on the institutional side. We're really not focused on the consumer side, but certainly that consumer side will continue to proliferate. I think what it's really GIS and again sort of some other technologies, information systems, I think for agencies it's really going to become more and more important in the way that we make decisions, and that really is kind of where we're focused is how do we enable agencies to really make the best and most strategic decisions. That's certainly one area. There's many areas that we're sort of investing as a private company. We have the luxury that we probably spend about 20 to 25% of our gross revenues on R&D, so that's somewhere between $250, $300 million a year. And that's really focused on really moving into a 3D world. So increasingly, we talk about creating a digital twin, if you will. So cities actually, believe it or not,
tell us more about that.
Yeah. So cities actually create, sort of digital models of their cities, and we have the ability to link our traffic models to those, our environmental, our land use, and so that in a certain sense we'll begin to use those digital twins to help us really better manage the real world. And that's really sort of the direction that it's moving. I mentioned the utilities already. Well, they've created so that those digital twins of their utility networks We work with any number of agencies that really have created those 3D digital models, and really does help them sort of better understand and better manage. And I think that's certainly one of the key directions that we're focused on. I guess the other would be big data, and certainly what we call the digitization of the world, so that we're really putting sensors in literally everything, whether it's our refrigerators or even our pets. We're putting sensors on our pet. So the ability to really be able to utilize that information and again, with our customers, predominantly institutions and government agencies and commercial entities, how do you use that information really to give you real-time information in ways that you can, again, use that information to make better decisions? How do you better manage your transportation networks? How do you better manage your cities in real time?
So a real sim city.
Correct, yes indeed.
Do you foresee a situation in which the data or the management of that is crowdsourced? I mean, that's one of the ways that technology has sort of taken it, but
right.
Is GIS suited to that?
It is. We actually work with a number of, so everybody's familiar with Waze and traffic. We work with Waze. We work with Strava is another one that if you go jogging in the morning, or if you take a bike ride, if you're a Strava user, it maps and so that really gives us really valuable information. What people also don't realize is that their mobile phones are a sensor, and we work with a lot of companies that actually have access to that information. Now it's anonymized, so we don't know that it's you, Tom, but we do know that here's a cell phone that's moving down the highway at a certain speed, and it's started here and it's ended there. And so we have the ability we have partners that actually use that information, so that how do we better understand our changing mobility patterns within our cities. And they are changing really quite rapidly. And so we have all these new, unique data sources that we have not had in the past that help us to better understand those changes, so that how do we design better services, whether we're the public transit agency or others, so that how do we understand that information so that we can provide better services and keep up to date, and really how do we solve those congestion problems in our cities. And so that's a combination of crowdsourced information and traditional information, and in really some quite unique ways, I think. So.
You referenced the anonymity of the data, and that raises a question about security of data, and at some point, do you see a challenge with resistance from just being able to collect all this data? It's powerful in what it can do, but at the same time, some of those users might be a little hesitant.
Yeah, certainly, and we're certainly very sensitive to that, so that while we are a data company, we do not get involved in sort of interrogating cell phones and that sort of thing. We're much more working off of administrative records and other information. But certainly, as I give presentations around the world, there's a great concern, and much greater concern, if you will, in Europe in terms of privacy issues than perhaps we have in the U.S. But I think those are real issues, and we do need to address those issues. That said, most everything that the types of analyses that we support and our customers, I've never felt like it was really intruding on any of those privacy issues, but certainly they do exist out there, and we do need to, I think, take them very seriously.
In the previous segment, we talked about some of the key users, state departments of transportation and city governments. With the increased power of the technology, do you see the user changing as we move forward?
So I do, and not only the user, but the types of users as well. So we, believe it or not, actually our 3D software is used by Hollywood, and we've actually evidently won some Oscars or Emmys for this. At least the movie producer had. So it's, in Hollywood obviously is, wide range of new types of users, but I do think kind of the democratization, if you will. So used to be that you had to be highly trained, and it was somewhat difficult really to exercise or to use GIS. Well, that's really changed in ways that I think that, what we're now seeing is that literally anyone, and that's in most of the organizations that I deal with, the big movement really is to how do we enable the field workers, and how do we give them the technology, so that how do we move them off of those yellow pads, and how do we get them on a tablet, and so that we really have the latest information in a database and not in the back of Joe's truck on a handwritten map.
And you were telling me a story from New Jersey.
Yes.
About, so one of the first applications of this was in Tom's River? Or?
So what we've been working in, one of the areas that we work in is really augmented reality. And so both for public works departments or with airports, you have all these subsurface utilities, and you really want to know where they are. And quite often cities will dig them up because they don't know where they are. Well, with augmented reality, you actually have the ability of literally putting those subsurface utilities into a map that then you can see with either the goggles, the augmented reality goggles, or even in many cases just with the phone. So literally you can see literally the subsurface, you can see where they are so that you don't dig them up, or if you do need to dig them up, you know where they are. And so augmented reality is, I just was on a phone call this morning with one of the railroads, and they actually have a big research initiative really looking at how can they use augmented reality. And I think we're going to see that across most of our industries as well.
So if one of our audience members is walking down the streets and sees someone in a mixed reality headset like the one that's been on the screen, they shouldn't be afraid.
No, that's correct.
They're probably doing a better job than others.
Yes, that's correct.
What about artificial intelligence as another area of potential application?
So we are spending a great deal of sort of research effort, and I think that we do see a tremendous future in artificial intelligence and machine learning. I quite often cite there are two MIT professors that wrote the book called The Second Machine Age, and by what they don't mean the physical machines, what they mean is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the application of those technologies really to our daily, what we do and every day. So we have been spending a lot of time, we work with IBM Watson, with the IBM group, with any number of other really artificial intelligence platforms. And the idea is that how do you use the data in a way together with artificial intelligence to teach the data, to discover new insights, and really where it's going is that we will develop really new algorithms that will be much more efficient than humans will be. So if you think about traffic management centers, we have the ability to capture all the real-time traffic information. Well, we actually can develop algorithms to actually have dynamic signal control systems so that we're actually changing the signals in real time based on the actual flow of traffic so that we're optimizing the throughput through the signals. Well, those algorithms, we're not far away from really developing those today, and they'll do a much better job than sort of a human sitting there trying to change signals manually. And I think that's the direction that we're moving, whether it's in transportation and traffic, or whether it's in any number of our other utility areas and health and so forth. There are some who see a rather bleak sort of future there, and I guess I'm hopeful that technology in many cases has always been neutral, and it's really how we apply it. So I think the benefit that we could achieve from GIS and artificial intelligence is quite great, but nevertheless, I also am cognizant of the cautions that we do need to be a little careful there as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And no matter how often you tell people that a driverless car or a connected vehicle may be safer because you remove the potential for human factor, just intuitively, it's a harder argument to make. Well, this is serious stuff. What about applications for gaming? Right.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned the Hollywood, and that's one that I actually have a counterpart that really sort of deals with Hollywood. I don't really cross paths with that group very often. It's they're in a different section of, but we're not so much involved in the gaming. I think the augmented reality. It's really how do our customers are predominantly, again, institutions, whether government agencies, private entities, and what, rather than gaming, I guess what I do see increasingly is simulation and micro-simulations, and the ability really to have, to use micro-simulations to, again, how do we better design, how do we understand if it's a micro-simulation, how do we understand that particular area? If it's a larger simulation, traffic modeling is really moving in that direction. So it really gives us much better insights, much better information to be able to, and that's really our focus, is I think more on the simulations rather than the gaming. But certainly, again, our Hollywood crew would be fully on board with the gaming, and much of that 3D technology is actually used in computer games and those as well. So,
do you see any particular applications for the trade sector for these advanced and newer technologies?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I really do. And I think that the not only within each one of those modes, and so for example, two of our big customers are FedEx and UPS, and UPS actually won the Edelman Award, which is the major award for supply chain management and operations research, and they really built all of that on top of our technology. And really what they're doing is that they're squeezing out inefficiencies and really designing how are we more efficient, better, faster, and cheaper in delivery and pickup. Well, I think, again, to go back, the real opportunity is as we begin to put those modes together, I think we're just going to see huge inefficiencies. And I think that's really where the real opportunities, if you will, for the supply chain managers of the future and the future of operations research, the ability to really sort of squeeze out those inefficiencies. And I think that's really a tremendously bright area for trade. And again, how do we manage those global supply chains more effectively and more efficiently?
Well, as we bring the discussion to a close, as you know, I'm an educator. And I think a couple of things you've touched upon, including the competitiveness of us as a trading nation, addressing the resistance to the technology, begins with making people comfortable at the K through 12 level. How do you see the best way to sort of introduce this topic into schools so that people see it as an opportunity?
So our founder, Jack Dangerman, actually made a $1 billion contribution to all of software to all of the K through 12 schools in the country, and so the software is available to any school that would like to take advantage of that, and obviously we have a large number. On occasion, we'll participate in specific initiatives. So again, our founder is good friends with will.i.am, the musician, and his way of giving back was that in his old high school in Roosevelt High, that he wanted to create a STEM program. And so in fact, we've contributed to that and really tried to make that a model, so that how do we incorporate the technology into the day-to-day curriculum in a way that we're giving the students really the tools to prepare them for many of the careers of the future, which are really going to have a strong emphasis on technology. And obviously it's not just GIS, we hope a wide range of sort of technology skills, but we're trying to do everything that we can to help propel that. And again, the technology is available to any school that wants to take advantage, and a large number already have.
And we'll make sure that information on how teachers can connect to that, because you don't have to be a will.i.am to be able to,
That's correct,
to make a difference. Well, Terry, this has been a fascinating discussion. It's a reminder of how much bigger than all of us in global trade is, and transportation, and all of the other topics you addressed. So thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks to all of you for joining us here at Trade Talks. I'm Tom O'Brien, and I invite you to join us the next time we gather around the negotiating table.